Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. I'm really glad you're here today. This is a pretty interesting episode. I think you're going to enjoy it. I'm talking with Susan Kraker, who is a therapist who has also taken the Online HSP course. She happens to work with HSP. She's an HSP herself. So this is really a very in-depth conversation. And we talk about a lot of the wounds that we both have as HSPs and as therapists and how that has kind of come to play. We talk about a little bit of a rupture that we had in one of the groups. One of the things that I love about Susan is her depth of processing and insight. And we have the capacity to both go very deep with each other. And that's very clearly reflected in this episode. And we talk about her experience taking the 10-week course, some of the things that came up. Really, she took the course because she didn't have very many HSP friends that she could really relate and have that sense of support and community and connection. And she talks about what her experience in the group has been. But I think it's just an incredibly rich conversation. So let me tell you a little bit about Susan. Susan is a therapist who specializes in relationships, midlife dating, and HSP courtship. Education: New York University, Gallaudet University, and the Doctoral Program in Counseling Psychology at University of Southern California. Susan is originally from New York, but currently resides with her husband Pi and 2 munchkin cats in Los Angeles. And now, on to the show. Sarah Bueno, who's been a guest on the podcast a couple of times, has a special offer that I want to tell you about. Head Heart Conversations is a webinar series for psychotherapists designed to invite your inner healer to the forefront of your life. This 4-part series will help participants learn about themselves as well as enhance their clinical skills, CEUs included. The first webinar on March 5th, 2021, led by Sarah Bueno, is called Conversations with a Wounded Healer. It's a call to action encouraging therapists to step into their own healing with courage. And as a special thanks to you listeners, you can get $10 off your order by using the code HSP when you register. For more info and to register, visit www.tinyurl.com/HHconvos. And now, on to the show. Hey, Susan, welcome.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
Definitely. I would say very highly sensitive person.
When did you find out you were an HSP?
Well, I think when I discovered Elaine Aron's book, which was quite a long time ago, I don't know, probably about 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, but nobody was really talking about it as much then. So I think that at the time, it really provided a framework for a lot of the things I had experienced throughout my lifetime that I guess I had sort of defined as problematic. And so finding that book was very validating. Unfortunately, at the time, there really wasn't a lot of people talking about it. So I found out sort of in a vacuum is what I mean. But it also was very helpful because it explained a lot of my childhood. It explained how my mother was, because my mother was an HSP, although she didn't know what that was at the time. The term hadn't existed for her. And it's sad because I think she really would have relieved a lot of angst and pain for her had she known. Mm-hmm. So when I found it, it was very, very comforting. I had a little bit of trouble with the title of HSP, but it was really, really great to find. It changed a lot for me.
So what do you think of the term highly sensitive person, and what would you prefer?
Oh, what would I prefer? I have a very long list. You definitely don't want to ask me that, of somewhat science fiction-y sounding replacement names for that. But the reason I have a little trouble with the label is that the academic in me is like, well, you don't use the word you're trying to define in the definition. There's that academic part. But the other side of me is that people have a predisposition to the word sensitive. And I guess there's a prejudgment just when you say the word sensitive at all. It's a bit of a fraught word, sensitive. And I found that when I've explained it to my friends or family and even my clients who are highly sensitive, to try to give them a framework for what's going on with them, there's a real resistance to accepting the title. And for people who are non-HSPs, the difference between overly sensitive and highly sensitive seems difficult for them to manage. I just don't know how well they're able to separate the two. And that is an enormous separation for us HSPs. That's a really big part of the definition. An overly sensitive is a big issue among most of us HSPs. So that's my reason for it. But, neuripolymorphic just doesn't sound good. It just sounds weird. So I'm going to keep trying. And hopefully I'll come up with something that feels a little more comfortable.
Sounds good. And just to let the listener know that in order to get some guests to talk about the Online HSP course, I just sent out kind of a group email to a number of people that had taken the course and let them know the questions that I wanted to ask. And of the people that responded, it was kind of interesting that we ran the 10-week Online HSP course, and then your group decided to extend for a month, and then has decided to extend for another 3 months. And then at the end of 3 months, we'll continue. So you and one of the other people, well, actually 3 out of the 5 of you responded, and one of them has already been on the podcast. So 4 out of 5 of you were really the only people that responded about wanting to do an interview. I just feel a need to say that, I didn't curate from this current group, but y'all were the ones that anonymously, without talking to anybody, signed up to do the interviews. So let's just kind of go back a little bit. You took the course in September of last year, 2020, and then we ended around the end of November. What things were you struggling with prior to taking the course? You're a therapist, you're a highly sensitive person, you know that, you work with HSPs.
I think the main reason that I decided to do the group, it wasn't a professional reason, it was a personal reason, which is that I didn't have a lot of HSP friends in my life. And I thought, where do I find these people? And where do I not just find the people, but where do I find a forum for the discussion of this, where I'm not constantly explaining it to somebody who doesn't already feel the things I have experiences feeling? So it was very much about being around like-minded people, finding my people, that feeling of finding your crowd. And there was a lot of desire to have an experience where I say something and I get a me too response. So that was very important to me. And I didn't actually think it would continue this way. I am beyond grateful that it did, but it was a really pleasant surprise to find that there were other women who were looking for connection as well as information. And I think that's one of the unique things about your course. There's a lot of courses on HSPs, and you get a lot of information, but I don't know how much actual deep connecting. And I feel like with the course, we went deep pretty quickly, and that was extremely helpful. I think as an HSP, it feels like we're forced to live on the surface of our emotions because people can't always handle the depth. And so to go into a space where there's a lot of information that pertains to you that feels very validating of your experience. There's a lot of information that's backed by statistics and things. As a scientist-minded person, I was very happy to hear. So a lot of that was validated for me. The stuff I already knew, there was a lot of new resources as well. But the connection and the sort of the quickness of the depth of that connection was what I was actually looking for. And it was there from, I think, the second group meeting.
Did you have any concerns as a therapist going in and wondering if you were going to fit with other people?
Interestingly, no. I think over the years, I have honed the skill of learning to fit in anywhere. I just don't know how authentic it has been every time. So I wasn't worried about fitting in as much as I was sort of a little concerned that I would default to kind of my therapist brain and not really be able to be a participant, and that when people would talk, I'd be trying to figure out how to help them. It didn't happen, thank goodness. I think probably because within the first 4 seconds I started crying. So that, can't really do that as a therapist, and not as a good one in a session with a client. So it didn't actually occur. But that would have been my only concern in terms of, I didn't have a lot of expectations. I had a lot of hopes, but not a lot of expectations.
Mm-hmm. What did you get out of the group once it was over, if we talk about the 10-week course?
Well, I mean, I did get a lot of, like I said, validation for the information I already knew and hadn't really had a chance to discuss at length. I think I got a lot of new resources in addition to that. I think the main thing, other than the connection with the other women, was that it was such a great experience to have an arena that was appropriate to talk about these things and to talk to people who are non-HSPs about, I think about one of the discussions where I said, I can't even watch a movie where an animal like trips. That really affects me. Like if the horse is running in a movie and the horse trips, I get completely, disturbed and upset by that. And I remember having told that to non-HSPs, and they just stared at me like I was a nut. And so to be in a room where I could have that discussion, it could be understood, and that there were other people in there that had experienced that was invaluable to me. And just literally having a space to have a conversation. There really wasn't, it's certainly not in my personal life, or even in my professional life, really. There wasn't a space to really talk about this except with clients in a therapeutic environment, which is a very different experience. So just being offered an opportunity to do that has been extraordinary.
Yeah, thanks. If you've listened to the episode with Rachel, I'll go back and see which episode it is, Rachel Glick. She is in the group, and Rachel and I kind of talk around something that had happened in the group towards the end. I totally lost my train of thought.
It's okay. Train will wait at the station and then you get back on it.
I know. It's the end of the day.
Take a sec. You've had a long day.
It has been a long day. Shelley, you can just leave this in because it's real. Yeah, I'm.
Okay, well, let's see. Have you seen any good shows lately? How do you want to go with this? Where do you want to go? I'll go anywhere you want to go. Can I help?
Go ahead. Please.
Okay, so you were talking about how you had the podcast with Rachel, how she had mentioned that something had gone on in the group at the end. And I think what you're referring to is that somebody hadn't shown up at the last, is that what you're referring to?
Two people.
That's right. 2 people hadn't shown up at the last group meeting, and how that affected us. I think that's what you and Rachel had talked about. I don't know if that's where you were going with your question, but.
It wasn't, but that works.
Oh, okay.
Let's go.
Yeah, okay. So what is the question? So how I felt about that, is that the question?
Yeah, well, I think that was a really pivotal point that we had decided to extend for 1 month through December because y'all wanted some support getting through the holidays. And one of the people last minute canceled. The other person just didn't show up. So we didn't know what had happened. And we did not think that they were going to be extending through December. So how was that for you?
My first reaction was that I was concerned about them because it was out of character. They weren't people that were unreliable or hadn't shown up before. So I think the Jewish mother in me went, oh my God, somebody's hurt in an alley. We got to call somebody. I think there was a little bit of that. And then I know this sounds a little odd maybe, but I think I've gotten really used to, okay, here I'm going to start to cry a little bit. I'm a highly sensitive person. We're allowed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, all right, here we go. But I think that in my life, I've gotten used to, sorry, take me a second.
Take your time.
People not always showing up. And while I'm crying about it now, I think I'm just crying about that particular feeling that I've had my whole life, not so much about what happened at the end of the group. And so it was jarring and a little upsetting. It sort of fit with the narrative that I've had. So it was manageable. I think that I mostly missed them. I think that's what it was. I wasn't angry or hurt. I was concerned about them and I missed them. I didn't personalize it. I didn't think it was about me at all. I don't know I hope I answered the question.
Yeah. And what we talked about is we often don't realize how our absence or our presence impacts people. And part of what I love about the work that we're doing in your group It happens in all of the groups, but I think because we've extended, we're really working on process now, that we talked about what that was like to not have them show up and what that felt like. And because many of us have had some of the feelings that you've had of people not showing up for us, that hurt, that disappointment, nobody ever allowed us to talk about it, that everybody had a chance to express it. And we followed up with a very loving email just saying how we were impacted by not knowing what happened. And it was the last group, so we needed closure. And that communication, the email exchange that happened was so incredibly touching, because that's not how we communicate typically about how someone's presence or absence impacts us. And I think it was very, very impactful to those two people and to the people in group.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that. That's true. That was actually a really big piece of this puzzle. I'd entered the group a couple of weeks late.
You joined on the second week, and you're the only person that I have ever allowed in after we started, but I knew that you would fit in and that it would work.
Well, thank you for making me feel special. And that was very generous of you. And I think that you did take a risk by doing that. So I really do appreciate you doing that. I'd been in on the email group, but it was the first time I wrote an email, I think, certainly of any length and I remember the email was a goodbye email. It allowed me to have the closure that I didn't get in the group. And it really helped me. And so to hear that it also was helpful to other people, the emails that went around to there was more than one, but mine being one of them, that also feels really good too. And the fact that she came back, that felt great. It felt like, and again, I'm projecting because I don't know exactly what her process was. Both of their processes were. The fact they came back, it felt a little bit like maybe they saw how supportive and loving that we were, and that we weren't angry and we weren't hurt, that it was just pure love and missing them and genuinely just missing their existence. I wonder if that didn't play a part in their returning. I don't know, but I would think for me, if it was me, it would have.
Yeah. Well, I think that when we communicate authentically from the heart, and we often don't get modeling for that, we don't know how to say, gosh, I felt so sad that you weren't there, and it really meant, I was looking forward to it, and your presence has meant a lot to me. We have so many wounds and hurts, and I think we just learned to kind of robo-mate, like, okay, nice to see you, bye, that we don't connect to those feelings. And to be able to talk about it, I think really generated not only love and closeness, but I think everybody realized how much the connection meant to everybody.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because I was raised in a sort of a strange environment where sharing one's feelings was not only encouraged, it was required. And so I grew up in this environment, which is sort of the opposite of what you described, which is, a constant expression of feelings. And so the fact that I was able to do that was sort of normal for me. But what was very abnormal and new was that I was in a room full of other people who were not only able but willing, because that has always been something that I've struggled with, is that I'm the one that can say, here's how I feel. I know exactly what I'm feeling. This may upset you. This may be embarrassing. I'm going to reveal myself. That's often met with someone listening, but not returning in kind. And so that was new for me, to be around people, even if it wasn't their natural tendency, that they were willing to take those emotional risks and go there. That was lovely and kind of a nice surprise for me. So the fact that people were willing to process even messy feelings around it, that was great. I think that's a large part of why your course works so well, is because you're not keeping the messy out. And life is what, 80% messy and 20% nice and smooth, if you're lucky. And so there wasn't like an off limits to any topic or any feeling. And I think that's what makes your particular course unique. It's not just a course about information and education, that it's a place to go, oh, we can say the wrong thing and not be condemned and rejected. Oh, okay. And we can process what the other person's experiences of that. And so if I recall, when they came back, the following group, we did process all that with them. And it was one of the first times in my entire life, personally speaking, that I felt what real closure felt like around an issue. And that's a gift, because, I feel like we, most of the time when we talk about closure, we're really talking about like 80%, maybe 85% closure. There's always something that someone hasn't said. And I felt like we had gotten the whole, kit and caboodle. I felt like we got 100% that day. And as you know, because you're a therapist, you know that one of the quickest and most profound ways to get to intimacy is through healthy conflict. And so while it didn't seem conflictual at the time, anything that, where one person is feeling something that the other person may have done or in air quotes caused, because, that's up for grabs, who causes what feelings for whom. But I think that that's difficult for a lot of people. And you don't expect to be responded to that way, with that kind of honesty, empathy, and mostly vulnerability. Because I think that's what we're all looking for as HSPs is, we walk around very vulnerable all the time. And so to have other people in the room go, hey, I was vulnerable to that too. It pissed me off or it upset me. And to actually have somebody really hear that at a core level and not have it mean rejection or disconnection, that's worth the whole price of the thing,
Yeah, we often deal with the context of what's going on, but we don't deal with the subcontext. We deal with the content, but not the subtext. And this group is so much about talking about what's going on in the moment and how are people responding, and in a very respectful way. I mean, you and I had a little bit of a rupture during one of the groups where I just misperceived what was going on. I mean, we didn't talk about this. So am I catching you off guard? Are you okay talking about it?
No, that's fine. Totally fine. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. I did think about calling, my friend in Little Italy, Jimmy the Whale, and having you, offed. No, I was kidding. I'm kidding. I did not. But it was interesting because you had already established the safety of the interactions with you in the group, that it didn't even occur to me to not tell you that you had said something that upset me. Like I didn't even go through that process that a lot of us go through where we go, well, if I say this, how is it going to be perceived? And are they going to hate me? Or am I going to come across as, a mean person? And that never even came up because you'd already established a safe interaction between each one of us in the group. And I can just speak for myself with me. And so I immediately said, hey, I didn't think that was hurtful. Or, I mean, it wasn't really that was hurtful. I just felt it was, maybe just a misinterpretation. But I was also open to the idea that maybe my response to it being a misinterpretation might have been my defenses showing. So, but we worked through all of that. I mean, I don't know what you think, but it felt like it brought, again, this is that healthy conflict equals intimacy kind of equation. I felt it did bring us closer. I felt it created, another level of safety between you and I personally, but also in the group. I thought it was actually really good modeling. I mean, not at the time. I was in it at the time, so I wasn't thinking of how the effects would be. But I think after we processed it with the group, I think it was a really good way to model a little bit of conflict between two people that actually have respect for each other. I think as women, we often get caught up in being over accommodating, trying to avoid conflict. And I watch my husband sometimes with his friends. I remember when there wasn't an apocalypse going on and you could actually go outside and stand next to people. I remember he would tell me stories of how they would play basketball with his friends, and they would someone would get mad at someone. Someone would say, oh, you're a jerk. What are you doing? And the other person would say, you're a jerk. And then they would keep playing, and then they'd go out. And I remember thinking, well, what would that have looked like if it had been women? And it probably would have looked like, oh, no, it's fine. It's okay. I don't mind. It's all right. It's fine. No, we're good. We're good. And then leaving resentful and maybe not calling for 3 weeks or talking crap about that person. And I just feel like in a way, the former is the healthier version. And we don't get a lot of modeling for that because most female friendships are based in this idea that we have to accommodate above and beyond being honest and healthy. Like people think of confrontation as being a horrible word, and that healthy confrontation, there's something called healthy confrontation, which is extremely useful. It's sort of the recipe for closeness. So I feel like it moved us into a more, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a less careful place where we didn't have to be as careful with each other. We could, that's that messiness. And that's really valuable.
Yeah, well, I think that what happens is when we have conflict and we're willing to work through it, that then we learn that it's a safe place. Because I misattuned with you and you were able to say that doesn't feel comfortable. And so I looked at it like I
Yeah.
apologized because I had a perception and it was not accurate and I apologized for that. And what happens is it's a safe place where I'm not going to get angry if you tell me that you didn't withdraw and punish. And so it strengthens intimacy. And when you were talking, I was actually thinking back to early on, I think the first week or two, you and I had some kind of an exchange and I don't even know what it was. And I remember a third person in the group saying, I don't think I've ever seen two people communicate that way before. And so a lot of it is about modeling. And then we had something come up recently with somebody who felt misunderstood by a lack of communication in the group. And again, when we can say that and somebody doesn't go like, well, what do you, I was just busy. Like, what are you worrying about? That people really heard this person and responded in a very caring way, and it opened up a dialogue, and to make requests about what might be more helpful in the future, what this person would like, what's realistic. We can make requests. We don't always get them, but we don't often communicate at this depth. And to have that safety of feeling seen and heard or being seen and heard allows for more of it.
Yeah. And I think that, certainly as HSPs, I experience this personally, but also my clients have told me this as well, that one of the words that's used a lot is feeling dismissed. I don't know if people know that there's a wide variety of ways to dismiss somebody other than doing it directly. And the example you just gave is, hey, I didn't mean that. That's not what I meant. And that didn't I wasn't offensive. That is a way of telling somebody they're not allowed to feel what they feel. And I think that just never comes up. Like that particular interaction doesn't seem to happen. Again, I do think it's the safety that you've established, but it also, is that you're, very willing to give of yourself, and you have a way of creating a perfect balance between how much you share of yourself and how much you hold back on sharing. So there's a really good balance there, and that you're really good at keeping that boundary so that you're part of the group. It's kind of like, I thought of this the other day when I was thinking about this particular part of it, was like, you're kind of the mom that like comes in and jokes around with you for a while, but then she drops the cookies off and then leaves you girls to what you want to do and leaves the room. And that's sort of what it feels like, because, when you create a group like you create, that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, and it has nothing to do with age, it just, you become sort of the maternal figure, the parental figure in that situation. And so to have a good mom type person model what it's like to own something. I mean, I wasn't surprised you apologized because I know who you are, but it was lovely. And, I felt like you did the three things I'm always telling myself and my husband and my clients to do, which are the 3 A's, which is be accountable, apologize, and make amends. And you did. And because you said you were sorry, you owned it. And then you also said, how can we do this differently next time? And again, that felt completely whole to me, like a whole beginning, middle, end kind of interaction. It's ruined me a little bit for talking to other people because I just don't really experience this all the time. But it also has really inspired me to maybe even push the envelope a little bit with people I really think can go there. Brene Brown made vulnerability a household word. Thank God. Thank you, Brene. She made it popular, which is amazing to me that something like that could be popular. But that really does speak to the culture needing it, because things don't become popular unless an entire community is in need of it and desires it. And so that kind of vulnerability is out there now. It's in the ether. And to be able to do that in a safe environment with these people, with you, allows me to go out and be even braver and bolder to do it with other people. And so I feel like one of the sort of unexpected results of being in the course is that, and I know Rachel has said this, I think she even said it in the podcast, is that the idea of like paying it forward to other people. I probably won't see it in my lifetime, but maybe 100 years from now, it'll be like extremely unacceptable to be anything but vulnerable, which would be fantastic.
Yeah. If someone is thinking about taking the course, but they're not really sure, what would you say to them?
Well, I'd probably ask them why they're not sure. I wouldn't want to dismiss the fact that they're concerned. But my feeling is that it's a safe place to go and leave. One of the things that I love about the way you run it is you say, you just be wherever you are. Just wherever you're at is fine. You don't have to show up in a particular way. You're not required to do anything. Just, I'll meet you where you are. Just that alone is worth it. Because where else in life do we get to be told you have 100% full permission to be wherever you are right now, and you don't actually have to do any adjusting? To me, that's enough to take a risk doing something that you may not know how it's going to come out. And if they're an HSP, they need this course, because not just for the connection, but the amount of information you give. And the course is structured in this lovely way where you have different topics every week that are related to being an HSP. And you, in advance, you send us videos related to it and links to all kinds of other resources so we can get as prepared as we want. It's not required. So you can come in not knowing anything about the topic, not having read stuff, or you can read everything and come in that. So that's also, there's a freedom there. There's no punishment if you don't watch the video. The amount of information you get is extraordinary. It really does save about, 4 days of going down the rabbit hole on Google, because you've culled together the best stuff and you've really been able to summarize what needs to be summarized. And then you give extra resources if we want to go further. There's that part of it. The structure is really nice. But what's also lovely is that you allow the structure to be secondary if it needs to be, so that because someone's showing up with something that they need to talk about, or that the group needs to address. I think this is one of your superpowers, is this like boundary thing about, how you're able to balance structure with the looseness of the group, and one flows sort of into each other. And so we do get the information, we do get to talk about the topic, but the topic becomes very personal very quickly. It's not some sort of academic, disconnected distance kind of learning. It's very much, here's the topic, like boundaries was one of them, and how that affects us, what that is for us each personally, what it's like in the group dynamic. Isn't that the best way to learn, where the topic actually becomes personal? I think that's how people remember what they're learning better, and how they process it more deeply. And I think it becomes more meaningful. So I would say that with all that, go for it. You're crazy not to take this course. And this is not hyperbole. It was life altering for me in a very positive way. It has made me a better person, a much more confident HSP, to the point where I feel like I'm an HSP activist at this point. It's made me very unapologetically sensitive, to use your title. And it's also made me a better therapist, to be honest.
Oh, thanks.
So, I don't see a downside here, people. I just think you should go for it.
Does the outside work, the videos and the resources, does that take a lot of extra time during the week?
Are you asking if it was too much? It's not. I didn't feel like it was too much. I didn't think you were overwhelming us. And the permission to do as much or as little as you wanted. And not just the permission verbally, but when you went into the group, there was no mention of, so you didn't watch the video? There was none of that. There was no, I'm going to hold you accountable for not doing it in the way that I wanted you to do it. There's none of that. Yeah, I think it's the right amount, because I think you say, here's all this information, take as much or as little as you want, and take it when you can.
The weekly videos, I think they average about 20 minutes, and maybe we'll link to a TED Talk or something else, and then it'll have some things to think about. It's very minimal, and I've had people ask, is it a lot of outside work? And I'm very busy, and it's like, nothing is mandatory, but even if you want to watch the videos every week, they're about 20 minutes each. Some go a little longer.
It's a forever resource, which is, it doesn't disappear after the course is over. So I think that that's really helpful, because I think that HSPs, one of the things that we do naturally is when we meet other HSPs is we want to educate them. And so it's just really good information to be able to pass on to other people.
And then the other thing is that your group is a very diverse group. I don't know why I still continue to be amazed at how diverse your group is. And it surprises me when I look at the makeup of your group and the fact that you've continued. I mean, I do see a lot of empathy, but y'all are just very different in how you show up with your traits and who's an introvert and who's an extrovert and who is in a relationship and who has kids and I mean, just very, very diverse. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was talking to a friend of mine actually last night, recommending your course, oddly. And I was saying, that it was extraordinary how I think if you had put all of us women in a room before we knew each other, like at a party, I don't think any of us would have walked away as friends. I think that would have been an environment where we were able to come together. And so it does sort of speak to the power of the connection and of that Me Too feeling. And that I think for me, it was like very exciting because there's always this feeling that your world is kind of small. I've lived on the edges of the country. I've only lived in New York City and here, Los Angeles. And so I think everybody, a significant amount of the people, at least 2 or 3 of them are in the middle of the country. Their life is very, very, very different than mine. And what they think about, what they focus on in their personal life is actually quite different in the people they come into contact. And yet that has not only no bearing on whether we can connect or not, but it sort of makes us, I think, all a little proud of ourselves for being able to cross those kinds of social, even political barriers and go to what's really important, which is the person underneath that stuff. I've been really happy. I also love the idea that when the pandemic's over, I can there's 4 states I can now go visit people in. I think that's great. And I'm learning a lot about different parts of the country. So, the idea that you can only learn from people that are like you is something I think that we all have been indirectly taught, that you should stay close to your people. But you don't know who your people are. They show up in very different forms and because your people aren't the place they live, the clothes they wear, the things they do. Your people are who they are at their core. And every single one of those women is like me on some very deep, basic level that allows me to connect, no matter how different their life may look.
Yeah. We need to wrap up pretty soon, but are you comfortable talking about what y'all did on your own a Saturday or 2 ago?
Sure.
Let me just clarify. So this is 2 months. The group ended in the end of November. So we've been meeting as a group for December and then January, and then the end of January this happened. So this is outside of the HSP course, but this is part of the gift of what happens with that connection. And when people say, I want to keep working together, I want to stay connected. So go ahead.
My mother passed away. Wow, just saying it out loud, instant emotion, instant. So my mother passed away 16 years ago. Because it was 16 years ago, a lot of people think I should, quote unquote, be over it. Actually, there were people that thought I should be over it after 6 months. I remember thinking I need to do something on the anniversary of her passing. I can't just ignore it because it won't ignore me. It will creep up on me anyway. I wanted it to be not a mourning, but a celebration of her life. And even more importantly, a celebration of the realness and the authentic relationship we had, which was fraught and had its many dysfunctions. And, my mother was in a great deal of pain. She had a very terrible childhood and she didn't have a Patricia Young group to work through her stuff. And so we didn't have a smooth relationship. And so I wanted to honor the reality of that. And I have tried to every year. And I have to tell you, I have found that for many of those experiences, I only have one HSP friend who doesn't live near me. It hasn't gone very well. People don't really understand why I want to do this, why it's important to me, and why I'm so emotional about it. About 3 years ago, I had a celebration I chose somebody to sort of hang out with. That was a turning point because she said to me when we were watching, I was crying, and she said, wow, that's really intense. She's like, I think that's a little too much. And it was the first time I didn't get hurt by that. I got angry. And I said, what if you're just a little too little? Maybe what if you're not enough? What if it's not that I'm too much? What if it's the reverse? And I got very upset about it. I decided after that that I would only pick people that could do this with me in the way I needed. And I had a couple of years where I didn't do anything with anybody because I didn't have anyone. And this year I took a bit of a risk, and I put out there that this is what I do. I asked anybody to do anything with me. I think it was suggested. I think I said I usually like to watch a mother-daughter movie, and I think I can't remember who suggested it, but it might have even been more than one person suggested that we hang out and have like a watch party online, which I'd never done before, which is, everybody watches a movie at the same time, but from a different location. Everybody was really into it right away. So that immediately set off my, they're just being nice, that little voice in your head that says, you're not worthy. You don't deserve this. They're just being nice. They're doing that thing women do by over accommodating you. And so I, in pure Patricia Young form, she was like, do you need a reality check? And I was like, always, please. And we checked in, and everyone said, no, they really wanted to do it. And everyone was interested in doing it and excited. And so I picked a dysfunctional mother-daughter movie, which is perfect, which is Postcards from the Edge, which is a fantastic movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it, with Meryl Streep and Shirley MacLaine. And one of the group members is very good with technology and computers, so she was able to set it all up. And she took the reins on that and set everything up. I had no idea what to expect. I was really worried that I would default into taking care of everybody else, which is something that I struggle with. It is, like I call it going into therapist mode. And so I was really determined not to do that. But I didn't know what it would be like. I was nervous. Everybody showed up except one person but they were having a very difficult traumatic experience go on in their world. And that was fine. And they were very communicative about it. That was fine. And, we even talked about it, about how much we missed her and wanted her there, but also completely supported what she was doing. And then throughout the movie, the other three women, communicated with me on this, like there's a chat on the side of the watch party, and asked questions about my mom. And we talked about movies. It was lovely. I'm very much a visceral, physical person. So it's been very difficult to be not able to touch people or just even be in the same room with people. Not that I don't love my husband, but, the same person every day, all day, and he's the only person I can hug. It becomes, not enough, basically. And so I didn't know if I would even connect to this. But because of who they are, the women, and because they're so in tune with, and that's the gift of being an HSP, that's the superpower, is they're so automatically in tune with, maybe they don't know what you need, but they know you need. And they just turn up the volume on being there for you. It was extraordinary. And everyone else seemed to have the same experience because, again, there's that little voice that goes, okay, well, maybe they're not doing it because they're supposed to do it, but they're not really going to enjoy it. Really, they're just doing this for me. It's not going to be fun for them. But everybody thought it was super fun, and we actually had a really good time, which, by the way, my mother would have loved. My mother was a very unconventional person, as you can tell by my story earlier about being punished for not sharing your feelings. And so she would have really loved the fact that I chose a dysfunctional mother-daughter movie that had things in it that represented kind of how we had interacted when she was alive. So it felt like she was there in the best possible way. And my mom also really struggled with having female friends. And I think that was directly related to her being an HSP. She was told she was too much a lot, and a lot of the things I experienced. So it was a great way to honor her by being in a group of women with the kind of experience she would have wanted to have. There was a couple moments where even the group members asked, do you think she's here? Do you think she's watching? And I was like, well, of course. I mean, I'm sure she's running the control room in heaven and telling God what to do, because my mother would never not control everything. And so I said, yeah, she's definitely here. And it was just a really lovely experience and surprisingly connective. When we got back into group, I think 2 days after it, everyone was very complimentary about how it went and that it meant something to them. And then we all decided, I don't even remember how that happened, but I think I said something like, like off the cuff, kind of casual, oh yeah, we should do this every couple of days. And somebody picked up and said, you know what, we should do this. We should have a watch party. So now we have a watch party every month where somebody picks a different movie, and we're gonna do that every month. So it's, again, connection leads to connection leads to connection, and validation leads to validation. It was just another boon to the experience of having, and this all came from just taking your course. Now, I'm not saying that like that's a guarantee you'll get all this stuff, but it certainly is a possibility. And like I said before, I don't really have problems asking for what I need and saying how I feel. And so I think I was the person who suggested we continue with the group. And then when the group stopped, I suggested we continue even further. And when we agreed to 3 months, I said, why not 3 years? And it was all because it was such an incredible experience. You know, if we trace it all back, it all goes back to that group in September where nobody knew what to expect. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So it was a really great experience. I mean, you were in the discussion of that. There was one piece of it that I think I struggled with a little, which was that you weren't there. And I think that was appropriate. I think from a therapeutic perspective, it was appropriate that you were the mom that dropped off the cookies and let us watch our movie. But you were missed, for sure. You were missed. And there was a little bit of a feeling on Monday, at least from my part, where like I wanted to come back and report to you. Like, oh, this is so cool. This is what happened. But you were definitely missed. And I wondered if it was something that was hard for you, or I don't know. I wondered if it was hard. I don't know if you even want to talk about this, but I always wondered if it was difficult for you not to be part of it.
I felt torn. That part of me is craving that sense of connection and community, that who doesn't want that? And what we talked about in group is I don't want my needs to get in the way of the group. And because I'm going through enough of my own relationship stuff, that I didn't want to go in having expectations and then feel hurt or angry or disappointed, that I want to really be present for you all. And having 2 boys that are 20, I've really had the gift of knowing that my job as a mom is to support them in being independent and to have their own lives and have their own experiences and make their own, what I feel like sometimes maybe not the best choices, to be there and support them so that they can always come back. And so in that way, it's very easy for me. And I think it's really, I love when you all do things on your own, because that's what we want. We want our kids to grow up and be independent. You women are beautiful women, and I want you to have your own connection that's sustainable without me. That's the ultimate goal, that you create these bonds that you can continue because you're learning skills to have that connection.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there's no template for this role that you have. There's a template for being the therapist that's, sort of self-contained. There is even a template for being the therapist who runs a group. And then there's the template for being part of a group. But there isn't really a known quantity or known template for being able to flow in and out. It's how I run my particular therapy practice, is that I have that ability, and I have that way of working where I kind of come in as much as I think is appropriate and connect, and leave as much. And so, like I won't go to someone's birthday party, but I will, on their birthday, I will definitely contact them and wish them a happy birthday. And, these are things I was taught never to do as a therapist. As you know, Patricia, I'm not a huge fan of following the regular way of doing things and rules. And I also just don't think that they always work for everyone. And so I guess on Saturday when it was happening, I was trying to figure out how to think about it, because there isn't a way to think about your role. Your role is just your role that, we're making up as we go along as a family, basically. Everybody has such affection for you, but they also have a lot of respect. So we're always trying to balance how much we want to respect your role as the therapeutic leader of the group, and how much we want to make sure that you're always wanted and included. And so I think that that's going to be just an ongoing conversation for us as we do other things. And it certainly is an ongoing conversation between you and I, and it's certainly an ongoing conversation in my head, is always what's the best thing in this moment. And it's not always what's the best thing in this moment for the other person. It's because you're part of the group in this sort of new, unique way. It does have to be fact. What's the best thing for everybody here? I guess we're just going to keep figuring it out as we go. It was something that I had wanted to sort of at least not ignore, which is a great part of the group, is you don't need to ignore anything,
Right. Well, I was thinking about you that day, and I did text you to let you know that I was thinking about you because I know you were celebrating, honoring your mom's death. So I think all of this, groups and therapy, are about relationships and figuring out where the boundaries are so that, for me, what's the best way that I can support all of you in the long run? And if I'm concerned that my personal needs are going to mess things up, then that's really, I need to pull back because I want to keep my role with you all as clean as possible so that I can continue to show up for you all.
Yeah, and you do that really well in the group. I mean, you don't just pull back on your own without letting us know. You'll say something like, there's something going on for me. And sometimes you'll tell us and sometimes you won't, depending on what it is. You'll say, you guys don't need to know this, but I need to own that there's something going on. And you almost always say, because I don't want you to pick up on something and misinterpret it. That's the plight of the HSP, is that we're like magnets and we have antennae everywhere. So we're constantly picking up on stuff because people aren't always communicative. We're forced to try to figure out what to do with it, what it means. And you never make us guess, and you never make us have to interpret it and then get it wrong. Because as you know, and I say this all the time to myself and to my clients, when you're going to guess what someone needs and wants, you're going to be wrong 99% of the time. I do this for a living. I feel like I have good intuition. I've been with my husband almost 25 years, and he comes home and he's like in a bad mood. And I go, is it something must have happened between us, or is it work? And no matter how many times I tell him all like a list of things that it could be, he'll always turn around and be like, oh no, there was traffic. Like I'm never right. Almost never. And so I've given up guessing. And you don't make us do that. And I think most of us as HSPs, we have relationships where we have to become detectives because people aren't that forthcoming. And it's not just that they're not forthcoming because they don't want to be. Sometimes they don't know how to frame what their experience is. That's another piece of why it's so safe in your group.
Well, thanks. I really try and name that just because I know that that's what creates safety in relationships. I'm feeling torn because we're over time and we need to end, and I'm loving our conversation.
Me too.
Yeah.
But that doesn't sound like a new thing for us. So yeah. I feel like that's a thing. That's a regular thing for us. But I totally understand that we have a limited amount of time, and I want to be respectful of that as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your experience. Yeah, I just really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. I can't think of a better way to spend an hour on a Saturday than talking about HSPs with somebody that I really adore and think is really an important person in the movement. And I feel like it's a movement to get people to understand that we're not too much.
We're not.
We're not. You know what? We're just the right amount.
Yep, absolutely. It's a great way to end it. All right. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Patricia. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Hey again. So what'd you think? I love what she ends with. We're not too much. We're just right exactly how we are. If you're interested in taking the Online HSP course and you're listening to this episode when it's released sometime in the spring of 2021, the next round of the Online HSP course will start the week of April 5th, 2021. There's early bird pricing if you register between February 24th and March 17th. Registration will continue to be open from March 18th through March 24th, and then registration will close and the price is going to go up just a little bit. If you want more information about the course, I've released a number of podcast episodes about this. If you want to hear other people's experience, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a tab that says HSP groups, and you can get all the information that you want, and you can register from that page once registration opens. If you have any questions for me, you're always welcome to reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. I hope you are all doing well. I appreciate each and every one of you. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.